Welcome to part 2 of stitching up the 4 seasonal panels. This is the summer sampler, which I was working on the previous video, and now I'm going to show you how to finish up this one. And these stitches that I'm going to show you now are also on the other ones. So I won't repeat it with the other ones, but I'll just go over them here. So one of my little tips on the letters, they have these funky little serifs. Did you know that's what that's called? So if this just went straight down, it would be a sans serif, which means no little doodad at the end. But these have a serif at the end. So I look ahead and I'm going to stitch on this side. So I'm going to carry my thread on this side because that's a little bit of a curve. So I do think ahead just a tiny bit. That. So I'm just going to do my regular stem stitching, and when I get down here, I'm just going to follow that curve over to this corner, and instead of turning the corner and going that way, since it's such a short distance, I just like hop over here. This is my little, it's like I find that easier. And then, I didn't need to turn it. And then I'm just going to stitch back this direction so that I have a nice point there. And then I'm going to pop my needle up down on this side and just come up that other part of the base. And again, carry my thread on this side since it's curved that way, just a tiny bit. So that's how you do the little serifs on the letters. And the rest of them are just, it's just a simple stem stitch. The other part of this middle with the word in it is this little running stitch. And these are just running stitches. And we did some of those before on the boat and on this little cone. So you just, it's like a little quilting stitch, just up, down, up, down. And usually I can get like 2 or 3 on a stitch. And then I'm just going to turn the corner here. So I just go up here, turn the corner, and keep going. So that is how you do that, and this is similar on all 4 of the seasons. This middle part is always the same. And then we're going to pop up to the outside. This is a blanket stitch. So when I start a blanket stitch, I don't start in the middle of a row. You know, I don't start right here. I always start at a corner. So I come up right in the corner, and then I go out to the edge of the tooth. I call these teeth like a comb, the teeth of a comb, and then come back up in that hole again. And now I have my first little tooth there. Now I'm going to carry the thread on the side of the solid line, go out to the tip of the next tooth, back up to the line. My thread's going to go under my needle, and it's as simple as that. And you just keep repeating it. And you just don't want to pull it too tight because these are kind of big stitches, so you can gather that fabric up. So it just needs to lay there, which is kind of tricky if you get to bigger blanket stitches because you want them to stay in this position, like that 7. But if they get real big, they tend to not want to quite stay in that position. That is why on the outside of these samplers, instead of doing a blanket stitch, I did a blanket stitch variation because it is such a big stitch. If you can see here, these are like twice the width apart as those, and longer too. Okay, so I'll finish this up and then I'll show you the outside, the variation of that blanket stitch. Oh, wait, and to turn a corner, so you just come to the corner. All you have to do is turn your fabric. It's really easy. And then I would come up on the inside of that little corner there to hold that in place. And now I'm ready to turn the corner. So I'll finish up and then we'll move on. So this outside stitch, this is the pre-printed fabric. If you trace the design, you don't need to trace every tooth. You could just trace this line and then just, you know, eyeball the little teeth if you want. But if you want them to be pretty uniform, you could go ahead and trace it. I like to use a Pilot friction pen that disappears with the heat of an iron. This pre-printed fabric, these lines are there to stay. They're not going to go away if I wash it. So I really try hard to cover those lines up. So that's why I thought I would try to use a knotted blanket stitch to kind of help it stay in place. So I'm going to start the same way I would with a normal blanket stitch in a corner. So go to the tooth, come back up in that corner. Okay, so that's the first one. Now the second one, I'm going to carry the thread on the side of the line, not the teeth. Go to the base of the tooth, come up on the line, but instead of just carrying the thread underneath, I'm going to wrap it around one time, like that. And then I kind of put my finger on it to hold it in place there. So there's my knotted blanket stitch, and it does make just a little bit of a knot at the top, which I kind of like that too. It adds a little bit of texture. Takes a little bit longer, but okay. So as you can see, it's covering the lines pretty well, but what I did find is that, I'll come over here, there, I don't know if you can see it very well, but you can see there's the line and here's my stitch. So you can kind of rub them into place and then maybe press it and they would stay a little better there. If you're going to be handling it and you want it to really stay in place, then what I started doing is I started anchoring each one of these. And I know that sounds like a lot of work, but it's actually kind of fun. And I really like the way it really makes a kind of a knotted little bubble there at the top. So I'll just start here on the corner. And you can tell on the back where I did it, because here's where I have anchored it and here's where I have not anchored it. So by anchoring, I just mean what I'm going to do is come up on the line side and then go down through this V and put my needle right where it should be, where I want that little tooth to be, to kind of pull it over into place. Okay, let me do that again. So at the top of the line, and then I'm just going to go into that corner and put my needle back right where that tooth and the line meet. So really easy. And it is, I do like the way it finishes it. Now, if I had just traced this and the lines were going to disappear, I wouldn't bother with this. But since these lines on the pre-printed fabric are here to stay, this is an option that you might want to try. And you can see it really makes it lay down nicely. So here's the part where I haven't done it. And here's the few that I did do it. So you can see the difference. They really stay in place. So just something to think about. Let's move on to autumn. So I have most of it done, but there are a few things I wanted to show you. And most of it, or I think the things that I've stitched, hopefully, are ones that I've already gone over. So the French knots, these little lines in the stump of the mushroom are back stitches. And same with these little veins in the leaves. Those are back stitches. This branch, there were two little lines close to each other. So that's two lines of stem stitches right next to each other. And then the knotted blanket stitch, the regular blanket stitch, the running stitch. So there is a little more running stitch in this one in the pumpkin. And these, again, are tiny, tiny, tiny little stitches. like in the snow cone, the ice cream cone. So if you're finding it hard to actually just go up and down for such small little stitches like that, you can kind of make it a type of back stitch in a way. So you could go to the end of the next stitch rather than the beginning, and then go back to the end of it, and then hop down to the beginning or to the other end of the next stitch. So you're not having to, you can take these stitches really, really close together that way without having to try to make such tiny, tiny little stitches. If that makes sense to you, hopefully that made sense. Hopefully you could see the difference, because these are so tiny. Or you can just continue to do a running stitch like that, either way. So, so that's it for this little guy. He's got the running stitches for these little vein things. I don't know what you call those. And then satin stitches for his eyes and mouth. The little vine that grows out here is a back stitch, because it's such a tiny, tiny little curve. A back stitch really holds its place well. One thing, I wanted to point out too is on these patterns, if there's a line that's pretty short, it might just be, all you have to do is take a single stitch. So that's what I did here on this vein. You can stem stitch it, but I just took one long single stitch. And same down on this leaf. It's just one. And same with these little shading parts on the apples and these. Those are just a single stitch. Okay, I'll finish up this pumpkin and then we'll move on. The top of the acorn's kind of fun. It's done using a couching stitch, and you definitely want to use a hoop on this, because these are long individual stitches and it would be really difficult to do without a hoop. So I've made the ones that are going that direction, and then all I have to do is make the stitches that go the other direction. And I'm not weaving them. I'm just going right over the top, because I'm going to couch them in place. So once you have all your stitches going both directions, then all you're going to do is take a horizontal stitch over the intersection. I am going to put one here just so that even though it doesn't need it, just so that it will look uniform with the other intersections. So you come up on one side of where they cross, and you just go down on the other side, like that. So super easy. You can make these as big or as little as you want. I kind of like seeing them. I think it adds a little bit more to the design element, so I make mine kind of big. Let's see, now it looks like I'm going to scooch up here. And we'll come back the other direction. So you just do that until all of them are secured in place. Get back up there. Sometimes you have to tell them what to do. Like that. Isn't that kind of cute? I like that. So that's as simple as that. It's a great way to, if you want to fill in a space, but you don't want to do like a ton of stitching, because it really is not that much stitching, but it really fills that space in. I moved my hoop over a little bit, and I usually don't use a hoop, but I thought it might be helpful to show you this stitch using a hoop. So this is a wheat ear stitch, and it starts from both ends and works to the center. So you can start at the top or you can start at the bottom. So these are the little ears of the wheat. You're going to start at the tip of one of the ears, go down to the base of the stitch, come up at the top of the next little ear, and then down at the base. Then you jump down to that intersection. These are kind of like little lazy daisy stitches. So you're doing it the opposite way. Usually with a lazy daisy, you do this part first. Now we're going to do it second, and we're just going to thread our needle under those ears, and that's what's going to hold the loop in place. So that's one wheat ear, and you just keep repeating that. So I'm going to come up on that side of the ear. I'm going down in the same hole that this little loop ended at. Do the other ear. And you just continue on. It's that easy to do. Only this time now, you're going to have to go through the ears and the loop and that ear. Go over here. So when you get down to this one that's in the center, you're just going to thread it under and then come to an end. Then you can do these French knots, and then you start at this end and work toward the center. And that's how we do these little repeated sections that go between the images. And I think that wraps up autumn. We're ready to move on to another season. Let's move on to winter. This one had some really fun stitches in it. To do this little tree, it's kind of a combination of a fly stitch and a pistol stitch. So pistol stitch, I'll do one out here just to show you what a pistol stitch is. It's, you know, like a French knot with a little tail. It's like the pistil of a flower. So I'm going to wrap it around 3 times, just like I would a French knot, but instead of coming down really, really close, I'm going to step it out and then pull those down and pull it through. And now you have, it looks like a little pistil part of a flower. So we're going to combine that with a fly stitch. So usually on a fly stitch, you're going to come down right on the other side of the little loop to hold the fly in place. And this time we're going to do it using the pistol stitch. So you're going to start at one side of the little fly, right there, and then you bring your needle down on the other side, bring your needle up at the top of the little curve there, and you're going to carry your thread under the needle. Okay, so that's the first part. Now we're just going to do the pistil. So we're going to wrap it around 3 times, and instead of bringing it down right on the other side of that loop, we're going to bring it down on the dot. Pull those loops down, snug, but not too tight because you're going to need to pull the needle through. And there you go. So I'll do it one more time here. I'm going to start on one side, down the other, up at the top, thread goes under, wrap it around 3 times, 1, 2, 3, and down on the dot. And that is how you do the little decorations on the tree. Let's skip down to this little cottage in the snow. There's several different snowflakes. These are just single stitches. So they don't go all the way across, they just go to the middle. Like you can see here on this one, I even left a little space in the middle. On these, I just brought the needle right down into the same hole in the center. These little guys are just 2 or 4 stitches, so to the middle again, but just 4 instead of the 6. Now these trees are done using a fern stitch. So at a fern stitch, you're going to start at the very top and bring your needle down where that V is, where the branches meet it. Bring your needle up on one branch, down in the center, up on the other branch, down in the center, and then continue down the trunk. So it's pretty simple, but it's a good way to make little trees, and that's called the fern stitch. And again, I tried to use different parts of the thread. So this one's a little lighter. I use dark thread there, if you want. Now the rest of it is all just a stem stitch. These are just little running stitches. And same with the smoke, it's just a little running stitch. And I would do the horizon and then do the smoke so it goes on top of it. And again, I try to use different color thread from the horizon to this, just so that there'd be a little difference between the two. Another place where we have snowflakes are, again, on the Christmas tree one and on this little coffee mug or tea mug or hot cocoa mug, whatever you want it to be. And most of them are just like the other ones with the house, where it's just individual little stitches. And these are the same way. These are just individual little stitches. It's kind of like it starts off with a fern stitch, where you can start at the end, go to where the V is, and then I would just go right down to the center. But that one didn't match up too well. And then you just continue out. Instead of starting at the point, I'm just kind of working my way out. So the point is, you don't need to do any stem stitching on these. These are just tiny enough that they're just going to be individual little stitches like that. And that makes a cute little snowflake. And this one you can really see the variation in the thread, which is pretty. To fill in these berries, I'm using a chain stitch with very small stitches, like 1/16 of an inch or less. And what I'll do is just do a single round all the way around. And now you can see I have one more stitch left. And so I'm just going to end it and actually put the needle down right on the other side of that loop to hold it in place. So now I have one round. And now I'm going to start another round. And sometimes, like if it's a bigger place that I'm filling in, I'll just kind of spiral all the way in. But since this is so tiny, I found it seems to fill in a little bit better if I do separate rounds all the way around until it's filled in. And it doesn't take too many because these are not very big. Another fun thing to do if you want to kind of play around with adding things to your stitchery, these could be some really cute little buttons if you don't want to stitch them in. Okay, so I'm almost back around again, and it's almost all filled in. And that's how simple those are. And then the holly leaves are just filled in using little running stitches and getting my thread knotted up there. Running stitches and a little bit of a seed stitch, I guess, because they're not really in a row, but just tiny individual little stitches. Does this ever happen to you? Sometimes I find if that does happen, maybe the tail of my thread is a little kinked. So I'm going to cut that off so that it won't do that again. And that's what you do with that. So I think I probably have like 2 more stitches, and then this holly berry will be all done. I want to hop back down here. Again, I found a little snowflake that I hadn't done. And one thing I forgot to mention, you know, I said some of these, they all came into the center. So that center is going to have a lot of stitches through it. So when you start on the outside. Don't have your knot in the center, because then all of your little stitches are going to be trying to be pushed through that knot, and that will make it a little more difficult. So start on the outside of the snowflake. That's my tip for today. The final stitch to do on the winter sampler is this little stitch right here. And this is a herringbone stitch, and I've couched over the intersects because these stitches are fairly long. So they kind of needed help staying in place. This is another one, since the stitches are long, where I would recommend using a hoop. Okay, So where you start is with this little X right there. So I'm going to pull the thread up, and the needle goes down on the other side of that line, and then comes up where this next stitch goes. Now I'm going to take it down, follow the line, and just hop over there to that one. It's kind of fun, actually. It's you kind of work backwards from what you would think you would do. Now the herringbone stitches are done, and I'm going to come back and I'm just going to do a couching stitch over the intersection. And that will hold them in place so you don't see the lines on this pre-printed fabric, and just because the stitches are so big. I also like that it adds a little bit of texture to the stitching, gives it a little more interest. So the last one that we have is spring, and it is almost all done. I did want to point out the handle of the umbrella. The shaft is 2 lines, so 2 stitches of chain stitches right next to each other, and the handle is 3, so it's going to be really full. And you're going to carry your thread on the outside of the curve and just do all 3 rows. I'll show you when I'm finished here. So that's what 3 rows right next to each other looks like. And these little raindrops are Lazy Daisy stitches. And that's the same stitch that I used in these little centered images here. So you're just going to start at the base of the little water droplet. Carry your thread around, put your needle back in the same hole, bring it up at the top of the base there, or of this loop, and your thread's going to go under your needle. Whoop, sorry about that. And then just tack it in place right on the other side. And that's 1. There's 2. And now, instead of doing the 3rd one, because then I'd end up over here, I'm going to pop down here and do the, I guess it doesn't matter really. I'm going to do the French knot, 3 wraps around. Sorry about that. And here's the last Lazy Daisy. These little veins on the leaves are back stitched, and I've shown you that before, but I'm going to kind of just refresh it here. So you go past where your thread came up and back down in that same hole. Now this little bee is really fun. I'm making him using fly stitches. So each of the wings is an individual fly stitch. So you're going to start at one side of a wing, come down at the other, and the needle comes up at the tip of the wing, and then you just tack it in place. Since he's such a small guy, this works out really, really well, because it'd be pretty hard to stitch him any other way. And the body is going to be the same way. So I'm going to do 2. I'm going to do 1 for the head. So I'm starting on one side of the body, coming down on the other side of the body, up at the head. And now instead of tacking it right on the other side of the loop, I'm going to do 1 of the antenna and then go up and do the other one and bring it down inside of that loop. And then I just kind of repeat that same step with the stinger on the bottom. The thread goes under the needle, and there's his stinger. And then all I have to do is just a couple stitches, satin stitches, to make his stripes. So I'll start with the little bottom there. So we'll just do 1, 2, move up and do this middle stripe. This little wing kind of closed up there. I might have to tack that in place. There's his middle stripe, and then he just needs a little bit of a head there. There we go. So it did close up just a little bit. I'm actually going to tack the tip of his head where it's supposed to be. I'm showing you this. I don't have to. I could pretend that everything works out hunky-dory. But I'm showing you this just to show you that, you know, it's okay if it doesn't work out perfectly the first time. You can do what you need to do to make it work. See, moving down here to the bunny, we've got these wonderful little leaves. Now, if you don't want to fill them in, you can just do a stem stitch around them. But I really like them filled in. And I filled these in using a fishbone stitch. So since this leaf is going to be on top of this stem, I stitched that stem first. So you're going to start at the tippy top of the leaf and bring your needle all the way down to the base. And then you're going to bring your needle up right on the drawn line on one side of that initial stitch. Now you take the needle across that center vein about halfway down and bring it up on the other side of that initial stitch. Cross over that center and then come up on the other side. So you just alternate sides and you keep bringing the stitch that crosses over a little bit farther down as you go. So it kind of makes a little V shape to the leaf. And you just keep going until it's all filled in and you can't see your drawn lines anymore. And by the end, they're just all kind of meeting in the base like that. And as I was saying before, little stitches or little lines are just a single little stitch, like this bunny's tail. So these are just tiny little stitches. And the last stitch on spring that I wanted to show you is these veins on this leaf. So I stem stitched the outside of the leaf, and now I'm just going to come back and do individual little stitches. So I'm going to start at the outside and work my way to the middle. So I'm just forming these little tiny V's like that. So those are individual stitches. They're not a stem stitch, and they don't get long enough where they're going to get out of place, so you don't have to tack them or anything. And that's how these are made. And then the rest of this nest is little seed stitches. And we have some more running stitches up on the rainbow and the smoke and the sun rays. And the little doorknob is just a single tiny little stitch. You could do a French knot with just one wrap if you want. And that is spring. And that concludes all 4 seasons. Hey, thank you so much for stitching these up with me. I hope you are enjoying the process. And if these videos were helpful, please hit like and always feel free to subscribe for future tutorials. Now I've got to finish up this little bit and then I'll be all done.